Hey guys, Double Wide 6, and today what I'm working on, I have a Stihl chainsaw. It's an MS250. I was using the saw. It's not even mine. I borrowed it from a buddy, and I was cutting with it for probably less than 10 minutes. I was taking down a swing set, so I was cutting like 2x4s, 4x4s. Wasn't even using it hard. Turned it off, turned it back on, or tried to start it, wouldn't start. And I ended up checking the compression. Compression was 115, and that's low. It should be about 150 or so, and on the high end, you know, like 180, 190. So what we're going to do with the saw is put a new top end on. So that's what this video is about. So here's a look at the saw. It's my friend's, and he took good care of it, but he cuts a lot of firewood. I mean, he might cut 3 or 4 cords of wood a year, and this saw is probably 7 or 8 years old. So I felt really bad about this, and I told him, look man, I'll give you $400 cash, and you know, you can buy a new saw, because I didn't want to just go and pick one up for him, because he might want like a different model. And it's only if you're the owner of a saw do you know how well it works, and I don't know if he wants this, you know, exact same model. So by offering him cash, you know, that gives him the option. But he said that the same thing would happen to him, and don't worry about it. Like, he didn't want me to buy him a saw, which I thought was really nice and generous. And you know, I just felt bad. So anyhow, what we want to do here is replace the top end, and that's going to be the piston and the cylinder. And you can get these parts online fairly cheap, about 30 or 40 bucks. I'll link it down below. So I just took off the bar. That way I don't have to worry about cutting myself when I'm working on the saw. I think the next thing I got to do is take off the carburetor. 2 nuts holding on the carb. By the way, the saw ran nice. I guess I should mention, I didn't put gas in it because I had so few cuts, and what I believe actually happened is I ran the saw out of gas when I was using it, which was dumb. You should never do that, because the saw will start running lean and starving for fuel, and you know, the saw gets hot, and then that's how your piston rings start to seize and cylinder gets scored up. Alright, so the next thing I need to do here is, looks like, undo these linkages. So this one can pop out of the handle. I don't know if you guys can see that. There we go. And so don't work on these all the time. Looks like I gotta pop this out. There we go. A little bit of fighting, I got it here. So there's the carb. And I'm just going to let that hang down. Looks like there's a gasket there. So this plastic runs all the way through here. So it looks like we're going to be removing the handle, and there's some screws underneath. A couple torque screws. So we'll get those out. And this here. I think these dampeners here, I believe it's just like a rubber grommet holding it. Let's see what's next. Looks like these plastic things just pop out of here, and that looks like it's probably what's holding it. Alright, we got a torque screw in there. There's probably going to be another one down here. So we'll pop those out. Right in here. So far all these torque screws are the same size. Yeah, these Stihls are good chainsaws, but they're all plastic anymore. And the reason I was borrowing my buddy's chainsaw is because I pretty much got rid of all the chainsaws I have except for one saw, and my saw wouldn't start. And if you don't use them, this 2-cycle stuff's really finicky and you end up having problems with it. And I work on this stuff. I try not to work on too much 2-cycle stuff because just like this saw, everything's freaking different. Alright, looks like there's one more grommet on this side. So I think this will pop out. I believe. If we can get this one out. There's probably a screw under there. I think this is the last one. There we go. Okay. Now I believe things are starting to loosen up. I believe. There we go. So now that handle's free. And now unplug this carburetor. Get that out of the way. So, as far as I could tell, this cover appears to be loose, except for that little wire cable there. This one. Pull the plug. Hopefully I can remember how to put this thing back together. The good thing is I didn't take it apart ahead of time. A lot of times I do that, inspect the parts, which is good because then you can tell what you need to order. But this time I'm taking it apart and I'm going to put it right back together at the same time. so it's a little easier to remember what's going on. So there's a metal plate, then the gasket, and then this boot is coming through here. So I think if let me see if this pulls off. I think it has to get pushed through there. Maybe not. Yeah, I'm going to push this in here. See if that'll slip off. Something's holding it yet. Looks like we have one more screw I missed. Yeah, there's a screw up under here. So if I put on the brake, I may be able to get to it. Now we'll see if this orange thing will move. Looks like that's loose. Alright. Another plastic clip on the back side. I think if I get this out, that should free things up. I feel like I keep saying that. Alright, there it goes. Alright. Looks like we're in here. So, at this point, I think what I want to do is hose this thing off, we'll clean it up, and we'll see about getting in here to the cylinder head. I'm going to pull off this recoil too, just to get that out of the way. I think this cylinder looks like it's attached from the bottom of the saw. There's that. Well, hopefully I can remember. This goes in here like that. pull this electrical through the grommet, get that out of the way. Alright, so we are just about in there. I'm going to go and hose this thing off. I'm going to plug up some holes before I hit it. I think that'll help. So I hosed it off there and everything's looking pretty good. So I think at this point I got to pull out these bottom screws, because that's how the top of the cylinder is connected. I think these screws run all the way through. I was seeing online you can buy the top end and the bottom end together, or just the top end. So these screws should be pretty long. Just trying to see. If that goes all the way up through, I can't even tell. I'll take them out. I'm really hoping the cylinder head's loose. It doesn't appear to be. Yep. So I can see in here, all the way down in there, that was the right screw. There's these two grounds that go here, so I'll pop them out. I'm getting to a point where we got a lot of screws. This plastic thing, this looks like it will slide up. Alright, I think what's happening is this thing's just glued down at this point. So I should be able to free up this cylinder. There we go. Now you can see how this plastic's coming right up with it. Alright. We got it out of there. A lot of work to get that thing removed. Gonna inspect this and see what's going on. On the bar side of the saw, there's a little opening, a little recess where you can take out that clip for the wrist pin. And I did get it out. Now what I want to do is push the wrist pin through. But it seems to be sticking. I don't think it would be stuck on there. Ow. So I'm just going to tap out this wrist pin. It's moving, it's just a little tight. Looks like we bottomed out. Just about out. You just want to be careful because there's a, I think there should be a needle bearing in here. There we go. This bearing looks good. Probably be a good idea to replace it, but I don't think I got one with my kit. So I switched over these the exhaust plate, the intake boot, the pulse line. I added a zip tie there that was a little loose, and that could have been part of the problem if we had a leak there. There's a little bit of scoring, very minimal. This is the exhaust side. The exhaust side is the one that has the arrow. I can tell it's the exhaust because it's burned. But the cylinder has some very fine scoring in there. But we're going to go through and switch it up anyhow. So here we go. These are the rings. And you got to be kind of careful with these rings. They have little tiny cutouts that are going to go on pegs on the piston. So there's these little pegs where those openings go to keep the rings oriented right. So we're just going to start out by trying to walk these on. I think I'll walk it into the first groove, and then once I get it in there, I'll walk it down to the second groove. So just going to carefully thread it on here. You always want to be careful with your rings because they're very brittle because they're hard. So that one's on there, and I think it's going to be easiest to get this out of here and walk it carefully down to the lower opening. There we go. That guy was sticking a lot. Next ring. Trying to start it right at that peg and then walk it right around till it pops in. There we go. Alright, those look pretty good. So we're going to oil this up and we're going to push it into the cylinder, and we're going to keep the arrow pointing towards the exhaust port, which is where the muffler is. So we'll take the cylinder, put some oil in here. So we're going to start by putting on one of these circlips. I'm going to use these pliers. These are easier than the old ones because there's something to hold on to. So I just want to try and get this in here. Alright, that's in there, in the groove. So I'm going to blow this off. I got a little bit of dirt on it. So we're on the next step. Got the arrow pointing towards the exhaust. And we're going to drop the piston on there. And I oiled up the bearing and the wrist pin. So we'll put the wrist pin in here first, like that. Arrow forward towards the exhaust, and then the wrist pin. Now this is a new wrist pin that came with the kit. It's kind of odd that they give you the wrist pin but they don't give you that needle bearing, because I would think that needle bearing would be a good part to replace when you're working on one of these pistons. There we go. So now what we got to do is get our clip in. We're in there, we're just not seated. Still not seated. So I just want to give it a nudge here. There we go. Good. So to seal this up, Permatex Aviation Forma gasket. I really like this stuff. I've used it many times. Particularly good with air fittings, like air compressor stuff, even though it's not made for that. Pipe threads. It's made for gaskets, for going when you're just using a gasket. Helps little insurance so it seals. So we'll put that on there like that. We're going to let that dry, and then going to be using the right stuff. This stuff's really the best thing I know of for sealing up stuff. So now we're going to add a little bit of this right stuff. There we go. And I'm going to end up spreading this by hand. It's probably enough. The other thing about this right stuff is when you put that cap on, it dries and seals perfect. You pick this booger out of there and it's like ready to go. It's not like a regular caulk tube. So I just want to get a light coat of this. And then I'm going to let this tack up for about 5 minutes. Got on here a little thicker than I wanted. Okay, so it's been sitting a while. We're going to take this thing. I'm going to make sure my rings are in the right spots. They look good, and this cylinder is actually tapered. So this piston should just kind of walk itself right up in there. There it goes. Tell you what, for an aftermarket cylinder, that thing fit right on there. Alright, I don't want to torque those down. I'm going to wait a few minutes. I think I'll put the nuts in, but I won't torque them. So we'll just get it lined up, and then I want to spin the piston over and make sure it's free and spinning properly. So there's a few screws that go in the bottom. I think we'll just get opposite sides in there, and we will try and get them started. Feels like it started. Pistons moving up and down freely without any binding. And that actually feels really good. Alright, time to put this back together. I had a ground screw here with these two wires. And this aftermarket block is already threaded for this screw. Sometimes when you buy this aftermarket stuff, you have to tap your own threads. Good. And what's next? It's a great question. I think we'll put the muffler on. Just about every bolt was the same size except for the bottom ones were longer, and there was one bolt that held the ground that was a little bit smaller. Okay. I guess there was a cap on here. So I decided to change the impulse line because it felt very loose. I'm trying to think where it is. Here. It's a little bit hard, a little bit loose. So I put on a new one, and now I'm trying to work on this cover. These saws, they are really tough to work on, especially if you don't do it every day. I think this goes up through here. There we go. And now, those seem good. I'm going to put on this grommet. So you got to reach in here and pull through this intake boot without ripping it. Probably made that look easy. Alright, so looks like we got to put some screws in this thing and kind of button it up. So I got it back together, guys, and we're going to see if it'll fire. Good compression. So I'm going to adjust the carb a little bit. I want to make it a little bit richer, and I got to make sure it idles. Alright guys, with a little bit of screwing around, I got the saw running real nice. Now one thing to keep in mind is when you have a saw that's running lean like this one was, you might want to replace the carburetor right away. I ended up trying to run this thing. I was going to adjust the carburetor. I tried adjusting it and I couldn't get it to quite run right, or actually idle right. So I ended up pulling the carb and completely cleaning that. And I topped off the I used like a 40-to-1 mix, and then I added like another capful of 2-cycle oil. So I'm trying to run it rich so that you know, as the parts wear in, they're not going to get scored up or scratched at all. And you always want to remember to run the saw very light. So I'm going to try and run about a tank of gas through it at idle speed, and then I'm going to have my buddy, I'm going to tell him to cut in short bursts. So maybe cut for 10 minutes, then 20 minutes, then 30 minutes. And don't cut anything big and no long days. After you run a tank or two through with a little bit of extra oil, then you can start running the saw as normal. So guys, we got the saw all back together, and I've done a few of these Chinese aftermarket heads, and you know, as far as the top end, I think that thing only costs like 40 bucks, and I imagine that saw will be good for another 10 years or so. So anyhow, guys, thanks for watching, and you'll have to let me know down in the comments what you thought. All right, take care.